Great. Okay. Welcome everybody. My name is Maurice Gleeson. I am a volunteer with ISOG, the International Society of Genetic Genealogy, who helped organise these DNA lectures, and they've been sponsored by Family Tree DNA. So a very big thank you to our sponsors. It's great to see so many people here today and interested in autosomal DNA testing. I've been doing DNA testing for the last 10 years or so, and autosomal DNA is the one where I have most of my matches. So just to give you a brief background, I'm a psychiatrist by profession, moved into the pharmaceutical industry, and then discovered genealogy, and everything was put to one side, and I just devoted my life to finding my ancestors. It does get very, very addictive, and DNA is part of that addiction, because once you start testing, you can't stop. So I'll be talking today about autosomal DNA and how to use it in practice. Just to start off, how many people have actually done an autosomal DNA test? Great, okay, quite a few people in the audience, that's fantastic. Well, what I'm going to talk to you about today is how you can actually use it. There's some very, very important take-home messages. The most important is you can ignore everything that I'm going to say to you in the next 45 minutes, and we can reduce the power of autosomal DNA to some very, very simple procedure, which is just basically sharing your pedigree with your match and asking them, do you recognize any common surnames, common locations, common ancestors? We'll talk about that. So, very important first question is, what is your goal when you're doing autosomal DNA testing? And for many people, they say, well, I'd like to see what my ethnic makeup is, what my genetic mix is, and where my DNA comes from, Africa, Europe, Asia. Other people will say, confirm known or suspected relationships within my draft family tree. I think those people are related to us. I think if we test one of those people and we test ourselves, then we get a connection. And I've done that with some Australian cousins as well. We haven't seen them since 1886. But when this 80-year-old chap in Australia tested, he came out as a second cousin to my dad, and we never knew they existed. So it was a very, very useful use of DNA testing. Another goal that people have is to try to use DNA to break through brick walls by connecting with unknown distant cousins and using what they know about their family tree to supplement yours. So you might actually connect with somebody who has the family Bible that's been in their family for the last 6 generations. And in a matter of just connecting through DNA, you're able to put your own family tree back a couple of more generations on a particular ancestral line. And a lot of people like the social aspect of things, connecting with long-lost cousins that you might never have heard about and establishing a relationship with them. So there's a very big social aspect to DNA testing. And I think a lot of the people that you'll see at the ISOG stand, we've just become friends over many, many years, and then discovered that we were actually related to each other as well. So maybe DNA is in the genes. So those are the kind of questions that you need to ask yourself before taking a DNA test. And just to recap on the different types of DNA, the Y-DNA, of course, is on the father side, and it only does that one ancestral line. Mitochondrial DNA traces back along the mother's side, it only traces that one ancestral line. The autosomal DNA goes back about 5 to 7 generations, and it looks at about 64 different ancestral lines, which is why you get many, many more matches on the autosomal DNA than you do on the Y-DNA or the mitochondrial DNA. And the Y-DNA, mitochondrial DNA, very good for deep ancestry, migration studies, as well as recent ancestry, but the autosomal DNA is only really recent ancestry. It will connect you with cousins with whom you share a common ancestor back to about the level of 1700, 1750, but it's not very, very useful before that. So it's only very, very useful for recent ancestry. And this is a recap on your chromosomes. We've got 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chromosome pair number 1, there's 2 copies of that, one paternal, one maternal. Chromosome 2, 2 copies. Chromosome 3, 2 copies, one from the father, one from the mother, all the way down to chromosome 32. Then you've got X and Y, the sex chromosomes, the final pair, making it 23 pairs of chromosomes altogether. And then your mitochondrial DNA. And the important thing to know is that these first 22 pairs are just known as the autosomes, and they account for 95% of your DNA. So by doing an autosomal DNA test, you're comparing 95% of your DNA with 95% of the DNA of everybody else in the database. This is my family tree. That's me. I've tested, and that brings me back to about the level of my 64 four-times great-grandparents. But I've also tested my father, and that brings me back an extra generation, potentially, on that particular paternal side. And I've tested my mother's sister, and that brings me back an extra generation. With autosomal DNA, it's important to test the oldest generations in your family so that you can get that extra reach in your test. And the path of autosomal DNA transmission. Well, I've got 50% of my DNA from each of my parents, 25% from each of my grandparents, 12.5% from my great-grandparents, 6%, 3%, 1%, 0.8%. So when you go back to the level of your 64 four-times great-grandparents, the most DNA you're going to get from any single one of those ancestors is only 1.6%. So you can see that as you go back further in time, it gets less and less. And as you go further back, some of your ancestors start to drop off. They don't actually, you won't have inherited any DNA from a particular ancestor back about the level of your 8th or 9th generation. So it's very important to remember that from any single ancestor, their particular contribution to your genetic makeup is actually very small. And it gets smaller the longer you go back. We also have what I call the genetic lottery. Because there's two things that happen when DNA is being passed on from a parent to their child. First thing the parent does is they shuffle the DNA, and they only give you half of their cards. So like a pack of playing cards, they'll shuffle the cards, and you'll only get half of them. The other half will disappear completely. So with any that's the first thing. You only get 50% from any parent, and therefore you only get 50% from a paternal side of the family, 50% from your maternal side of the family. The other thing is recombination, and recombination is like shuffling. It will actually shuffle the cards up, and it will tear the cards in half, and then team up different halves with different other halves. So you might have, your parents might have the 6 of clubs, but by the time you get it, it's the top half of the 6 of clubs and the bottom half of the Queen of Hearts. So there is this shuffling that goes on between the chromosomes before they get passed down. And because of that, it is really a lottery whether you actually inherit a particular segment from a particular ancestor. You know, the idea that a particular segment could pass down unchanged from generation to generation is actually very, very low. So if you're looking, you know, did I get any chromosome from my chromosome 1, for example? Is my chromosome 1 from my great-great-great-grandparent on my father's side? Very, very unlikely, because it will have been broken up and it will have been shuffled and passed down along the ancestral line. And that takes us to how much of our DNA do we get from each of our ancestors. If you go back to a 4-times great-grandmother, she passes on 50% of her DNA to each of her children, and then those children pass on half of that, and then half of that, and then half of that, half of that. So by the time it gets down to me, I only have 1.5% of that DNA from that particular ancestor. The other thing to be aware of is that siblings will share 50% of their DNA in common. So myself and my brother, we both got 50% from each parent, but the 50% that I got from my father is not necessarily the same 50% that he got from his father. So that's why siblings do not share 100% of the DNA, even though they both have the same parents. They only share 50% of the DNA. And then when it comes down to first cousins, you have it on this side, you have it on this side, so it comes down to 12.5%, and then the next generation is 3%, the next generation is 0.8%. So you can see that the more distant the relationship, the really more, the smaller the amount of DNA that people actually share. So when you get down to the fourth cousin level, you would only share roughly about 0.2% of your DNA with your fourth cousin. And that's why the autosomal DNA works better with the closer relationships, first, second, and third cousins. Another Another big question that people ask is, how many cousins will the test actually detect? Well, the test detects about 99% of first cousins and 99% of second cousins, because they're fairly close. But when you get down to third cousins, it only detects 90% of third cousins. It won't detect 10% of the third cousins you actually have. And it only detects 50% of fourth cousins and 10% or less of fifth cousins. And as you get below that, it gets really, really small indeed. And if you look at that in terms of numbers, and if you imagine that there's every family has 3 children, that would work out as you'd have 12 first cousins, and it would detect all 12 of them. You'd have 72 second cousins, and it would detect 71 out of the 72 second cousins. It would detect 390 out of your 430 third cousins, 1,300 out of your 2,600 fourth cousins, and 1,600 out of your 16,000 fifth cousins. So we all have maybe about 16,000 fifth cousins. The average number of children we have in each of our families through time is 3. 3 children per family. And that's why when you get your results, most of your matches are going to be distant matches. You're going to have 1,600 matches that are 15 or fifth cousins, and maybe only 12 or 71 that are first or second cousins. So these are the ones we need to focus on, but you'll just find in your results that most of your matches are going to be distant cousins. Now there's 2 approaches to autosomal DNA testing. The first is to ask a specific question, I'm sure related to that crowd, and we want to establish a relationship because they've got lots of money. And then the second approach is to say, let's go on a fishing trip and see what we can find. And today I'm going to talk to you mainly about the fishing trip because I think that's what most people will be interested in. And the first point to make is that there are several companies that offer this test, Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, and Ancestry. Ancestry is selling kits here today. Family Tree DNA is just on this side of this block. 23andMe have never been to any of these genealogy exhibitions or conventions because they're more interested in the medical side of things. But if you're an adoptee, we recommend that you test with all 3 companies because you never know in which gene pool of big fish is swimming that you want to catch. And last year, a 76-year-old lady contacted me. She said, I'm adopted. I've been searching for my family for 40 years. I said, have you done DNA testing? She said, I tested Family Tree DNA 4 years ago. I've got third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins. I don't know how we're related. It's over my head. I said, test with the other 2 companies and drop me an email when you get the results. 6 weeks later, she said, I have a first cousin in 23andMe. And I said, wow, that's fantastic. I said, send me the results and I'll just have another look at them. And she was wrong. She had not found a first cousin. She had found the son of her half-sister. So after 40 years of searching, within 6 weeks, she was reconnected with 4 siblings and a family that welcomed her with open arms. And that's the power of DNA. This is what your results look like on the Family Tree DNA website. And these are my results here. There's my name, my kit number. I've privatized these ones here, but we have somebody called Hare, Mr. Hare, Mr. Haddon, Mrs. Spearin. There's a Swords down here, there's a McGuire down here as well. It gives you the known relationship. If you know it, you can put it in. It gives you a relationship range, second to fourth cousin. Here's another second to fourth cousin here. And it also tells me the amount of DNA that is shared. This is 104 centimorgans, 61, 66, 45. Centimorgan is just the unit of measurement we have for DNA. Very importantly, it allows people to put their ancestral surnames in. So if you've done an autosomal DNA test with Family Tree DNA, do put in your ancestral surnames. Here is somebody here who has a surname Morgan that came from Ireland and Spearin that came from Ireland. Here is somebody that has Glennon from Ireland and Langan from Ireland. This one has Friel, Brunswick, and Friels and Brunswick. Very, very helpful, very, very useful, because ultimately this is all the information that you need, potentially, to see whether it's worth contacting somebody. Oh, I see you have a Morgan in your family tree. I have a Morgan in my family tree. Can you tell me a little bit about yours? I'll tell you about mine. Let's share pedigrees and just compare notes. The nature of matches. Most matches will be more distant relatives. For example, I had 360 matches in all, but I've got a little bit more now because as more people join the database, I get more and more matches. I have no close relatives other than those that I took with myself. I have 5 second to fourth cousins, which is about 2% of your matches with second to fourth cousins, and 8% of my matches with third to fifth cousins. And it's this top 10% that I'm interested in, because I'm not going to put 360 genetic cousins on my Christmas card list. It's just too much, and it's going to kill me in terms of posting. So I'm only really interested in these close ones. The ones that are more distant, as you go out, you'll find a lot of them actually are false positives. Because the nature of the test, if you're comparing a small segment with another small segment, just by chance, they might actually look like they are matching. So you have to be very careful with the small segments. Anything above 15 centimorgans is probably okay. Anything below 15, as you get smaller and smaller, chances of a false positive get higher. It's important to collaborate and to reconstruct family trees if necessary. And most Irish family trees, which is where my background comes from, can only go back to about 1800, and then we hit a brick wall. So I'm hoping that with autosomal DNA testing, I can actually break through some of those brick walls around about the 1800 time point, which for me would be about third cousins. People who have ancestors born about 1800 who match me, if they're the same age as myself, then I'm looking that they would be probably my third cousins, maybe third cousin once removed or fourth cousins. So that's what I'm hoping for. And it limits the possibility of connecting really with anything over third cousins. It is a problem for Irish family tree because of that big brick wall that we have there. So I'm going to talk to you about a step-by-step approach. Step 1 is where does the common ancestor sit? Step 2 is the common ancestor obvious? Step 3, we eliminate non-contenders. That's a big step. We'll look at the various stages of that. And then step 4 is working with small triangulated groups, or as I like to say, establishing relationships with people you're probably not related to. So it can get very, very time intensive, and it's important that you approach this with a lot of caution. We're going to use 3 techniques. We're going to look at pure genealogy. We're also going to look at the technicalities of DNAs, and we're going to be looking about collaboration, and collaborating one-to-one with other people, and also collaborating in small groups of people with whom you all share maybe a same segment of DNA. But the important point, as I said at the beginning, is you can skip all of this, and you can simply contact your match, click on the icon of your match, get their email up, send them an email saying, here's my pedigree, do you see any common locations, any common surnames, any common individuals? And what I've done is, because I use Ancestry, I go into pedigree view, and then I click on print, and I can save it as a PDF, and I just send them a PDF of my maternal side of the family tree and my paternal side of the family tree. So that's all I do. Nowadays, if somebody sends me an email and says, oh, I think we're matching on chromosome 18, I say, well, let me stop you there. Here's my pedigree. Do you see any common locations, surnames, or individuals? And if they say no, I say, okay, well, let's keep in touch, and if you find anything, let me know, and if I find anything, I'll let you know. And it just saves a lot of time, because you can be looking for small segments here, small segments there. The easiest thing is to say, here is my pedigree. Now, of course, I don't have a major problem sharing my pedigree, but what I have done is I haven't given the date of birth to my father, so, I have privatized it to a certain extent. You can leave out certain ancestors, print off this, and then put them back in your own tree if you want to. So it very much depends on the level of comfort that you have with privacy and sharing your own work. But I don't have a major problem personally with just giving a PDF print out of my pedigree. And these are just the several tactics, looking at DNA, looking at genealogy, looking at group work, and the focus is on collaboration and networking. We might do some automated data gathering if we have the time, and then there's a variety of different third-party tools that you can use with your DNA results. So we'll talk about GetMatch, DNA adoption, DNA GetCom, the ADSA spreadsheet, and mention GenomeMate as well. So there's a lot of third-party utilities you can use, and of course you can get into this very, very deeply, and if you have nothing better to do with your time, you will pass away hours and hours of fun just looking at this DNA, and it can be quite fun. But the secrets to success are to start with your closest matches, share your tree, develop a relationship with your matches, and keep track of what you're doing. How many times have we actually gone over a set of records and say, these look incredibly familiar? And they look back through your notes and think, oh, I did those 2 years ago. Right. Well, it can be the same with DNA as well. And that's why spreadsheets can be quite useful. So, anybody use Excel spreadsheets? Quite a few people. Yeah, so it can be quite useful to use Excel spreadsheets. So step 1 in this 4-step process, where does the common ancestor sit? And it's all about positioning the common ancestor on your family tree. And everybody who's a genealogist, which I think is most people in the audience, will be very familiar with this. So, for example, if I get a match with a third cousin, say it comes back as a third cousin match, then I know that it has to be somewhere at the level of my great-great-grandparents. And that places it around about 1835 in my own particular family tree. So just knowing where what kind of matches it is. Is it a second cousin match, third cousin match, fourth cousin match? You can actually place it at a particular level, and you're identifying 16 potential candidates for the common ancestor with this third cousin match. If it was a fifth cousin match, then you'd be looking at 64 potential candidates among your 4 times great-grandparents. But of course, they're all married to each other most of the time, not always, but most of the time. So you're looking at 32 great-great-great-great-grandparental couples. So again, it's useful to think about this and positioning where the candidate for this DNA match might be. However, a lot of the time when they estimate that you're a third cousin match or a second cousin match, it is just that, it's an estimate. So for example, what we might find out is that if we looked at the suggested cousin match here, suggested first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, let's look at the third cousin. The actual relationship might be that for all of the, say there's 100 people who have come back with a suggested third cousin match, 10% of them might actually be second cousins. 70% of them would actually be third cousins in reality. 15% might be fourth cousins, 5% might be fifth cousins. So, around any estimate, there's a range on either side. And as you get down to, say, something like fifth cousins, they might say the most likely relationship is fifth cousins. It might actually be more likely that it's more further removed from you than that. So just be very careful with these estimates. With the more distant estimates, very frequently you'll find that the relationship is further back than you anticipate. The other thing to be aware of is that if you have any endogamous relationships within the family, or any kind of endogamy, then with cousins intermarrying, you get a surplus of DNA being passed down from that particular ancestral couple. And that is going to make connection look closer than it actually is. This is how pedigree collapse occurs. And it's more relevant to the small isolated communities. So, say in Ireland, where there's small rural communities, there tends to be inadvertent intermarrying of cousins. People will get married and they won't actually be aware that they are cousins. My dad calls it socially acceptable inbreeding. So, do be aware of that. If any of you have ancestors that came from a small, isolated, rural community, then this is a possibility. It also happens in certain groups like the Ashkenazi Jews, the Romani people, the Hindu caste, and the Jehovah's Witnesses as well. So if you have any ancestors that come from any of those groups, do be aware that if you get 2 Jehovah's Witnesses matching as potential third cousins, it could be 6th cousins on one side of the family and 4th cousins on the other side of the family, making it look like they're third cousins overall. There's a range of DNA shared between different relations, and this is a very good diagram that is from that particular website there. And this is being recorded for YouTube, so if you want to, you can go back and look at this video again and again and again, and get all of these links as well. But if this gives you, say, here's yourself, here's the various relationships that you can have with various people, twice, the second cousin once removed, third cousin once removed, and so on. There's also a very, very useful table that has been prepared by Blaine Bettinger. And this is on the shared sentinel organ project. And if you, there's the link down there. But what Blaine has done is he's managed a project where 6,000 people have sent in the actual DNA values that they've shared for known relationships. So he's dealing with first cousins once removed. Let's look at second cousin twice removed. 552 people have reported on the amount of DNA that they've shared with second cousins twice removed, and it gives you the minimum amount of 0, so sometimes they don't share any at all. The average amount is about 130, and the maximum amount observed for this relationship of second cousin twice removed is 460 more centimorgans. So that can be very, very useful indeed. And these are when there's no endogamy reported, these are when there is endogamy reported as well. So it's a very, very useful sense check to actually look at these tables. And here's another example of the table looking at not just the total amount of centimorgans shared, but also the longest segment. And you can see as the relationship gets further back, the length of the segment actually changes quite significantly. So it can be as much as 306 for a single DNA segment, and as small as 71, or even down to 0 as well. It's a very useful chart. Step 2 in this process is to ask yourself the question, is the common ancestor obvious? And that means you have to compare trees. You have to compare your tree with the other person's tree. And it's best to share the link to your online tree if possible, or send them that little PDF pedigree. PDF pedigree is fine as an initial introduction. Here's my pedigree. Can you show me yours? Let's see if we can find any common locations, common surnames, common individuals. If you do find a common location, then maybe share the online tree and do a little bit more documentary research on that connection. It's very important to characterize each of your brick walls. Okay, so you go back in time. Very important to characterize your most distant known ancestor and his spouse. Birth, marriage, and death records. Do you have them available for him? Include that information in your tree. The witnesses are important as well, and both at the wedding and at the baptism of their children. Because certainly in Ireland, at baptisms, you frequently find the brother or the mother, brother or sister of one or both spouse will actually be the godparent or one of the sponsors. So it's very important that to have, because this gives you potential candidates for people that are perhaps in the other person's tree. You know, it may very well be you find that, oh yes, Winifred Gleeson was my great-great-great-grandmother, and we think she had a sister called Ermentrude. And then your match says, oh well, my great-great-great-grandmother was Ermentrude Gleeson. So maybe that's where we're connected. A little bit more research, and then, so it's important to have these sponsors. Informants on the death certificates and locations as well. Birth locations. If you can get a birth location, very, very important. Get the location as far back as you possibly can, and characterize each of those brick walls in your family tree. And of course, you can skip all of this and just send pedigree and say, here you go, see if you see anything, and if you do, get back in touch with me. And these are the most distant known ancestors that I have, and I've tried to characterize them as much as possible. But for example, here in this one, you won't be able to read it, but it says Tipperary with a question mark. I'm 90% sure that he came from Tipperary, but I'm not going to put it down as if it was a fact on ancestry. There are very few facts on ancestry in a lot of the trees, so you have to be very, very careful that you don't join that particular group. Now if you have a match, how do you find their tree? Well, the first thing is, on family tree DNA, they have a little icon here if they have contributed their family tree to the database. And the other thing that's very important, like I said earlier, is to list your surnames and where they came from. And that's possible here as well. So you can get a lot of information if people have been diligent enough to go on and actually put all of this information on their family tree DNA home page. Now, my dad has about 355 matches. This is a few years ago, but there's a lot more now. only 20% of them have actually uploaded a tree. And that's always a problem. And I think that's true for most of the databases that we have. Ancestry, 23andMe, only about 20% of people who've done a DNA test have actually uploaded the tree. Oh, and 66% have included some kind of surname information. But some people it's just, my father was called this, my mother was called that. That's their family tree. It should be a little bit further back than that if it's going to be useful. So what do you do if there is no tree? Well, you can find one relatively easily. And here, for example, this is me. But it's somebody who matches me. If they click on my profile, they'll get my email address, they'll get my most distant known paternal ancestor, most distant known maternal ancestor. And what I do then is I can take the email, I can do a Google search with genealogy and then the email, and it might come up with a specific genealogy website where they actually have their trees. So that's one way of tracking it down. The other way to track it down is to use the most distant known ancestor. I could put this MDKA into Ancestry or MyHeritage or Genes Reunited, do a search for this particular ancestor, and then I might find that he appears in a tree with somebody called Maurice Gleeson also in the tree, in which case this is most likely the tree of this particular match. So there's various ways that you can play detective and actually locate the tree of some of your matches. If you cannot find a tree after all of that, you can actually try contacting your match. Now, some people do not respond, but a lot of people will do. And some don't actually want to share their family trees, which makes, why are you doing the DNA test if you don't want to share your family tree, is a big question. Some will only give partial information, and many don't have up-to-date trees. So it is this is one of the main stumbling blocks with DNA testing. Because the DNA is a pointer. It just says you and you're related, now get together and find out how, by comparing your family trees. And if the other person hasn't developed their family tree, or I'm still working on that line, then it makes it difficult to actually find out where that connection is. So this is one of the big stumbling blocks, and that's why we encourage everybody to keep working on your family tree and doing the documentary research to build it out as far as you can go. Step 3, eliminating non-contenders. Now, I'm going to run through this fairly quickly because, like I said at the beginning, you can forget this completely if you wish to. It's rather technical, and I'm going to just skip through it fairly quickly. But we use a variety of techniques, mainly focusing on genealogy, but also on DNA, looking at ethnicity and nationality and geography, a match on the Y or the mitochondrial DNA, a match on the X. We can maybe separate between maternal and paternal sides of the family, and therefore eliminate 50% of our candidates as contenders for the common ancestor. And we can narrow down the specific common ancestor, and we can also phase our DNA and do chromosome mapping, and that is the way of the future. So the goal is to get rid of your ancestors. You have a match with somebody, you want to get rid of the ancestors that couldn't possibly be the candidate for the common ancestor. And we whittle it down by a number of different ways, and as we whittle it down, we get to perhaps maybe 2, 3, or 4 ancestral lines along which the common ancestor has to sit. So let's look at this. First of all, ethnicity. Supposing my 4 grandparents were Irish, Japanese, African, and English. The English would be, all those English ancestors would have a particular signature. All of the African ones would be in this block. All of the Japanese ones here. All of the Irish ones here. Well, if I matched somebody and he said, well, all of my ancestors come from Japan, and I don't have any other ancestors from any other country, well, then I know that it has to be somewhere in this block here. So that's how you use ethnicity. And the same can apply for nationality. You can actually narrow it down to the most likely group of ancestors in your family tree. Similarly, with Y-DNA, we know that Y-DNA passes down from the father line. If I match somebody, say a man, I match another man, and he's done a Y-DNA test, but he doesn't match me on my Y-DNA, well then I know that the autosomal DNA that he's passed down cannot have come down that particular Y-DNA line, because otherwise my Y-DNA and his Y-DNA who would have come down from the same common ancestor would have come down this line and we should match on our DNA. So that allows you to outrule one of your 64 great-great-great-great members. And it's the same thing on the mitochondrial DNA side. We know that the mitochondrial DNA helps us trace back along our mother line. If I've done mitochondrial DNA as well as my autosomal, and so is the other person, but we don't match on our mitochondrial DNA, then the common ancestor cannot have been on the mother line. Otherwise we would match on our mitochondrial DNA. Another thing that we can look at, I'm going to skip through this, is the atDNA. Now, being a male, I will have got an X chromosome from my mother and a Y chromosome from my father. Now, my mother, on the other hand, will be two X's. She'll have two X chromosomes, one from her father, one from her mother. And if we go back in time, her mother will have an X from her father, an X from her mother. But what happens is, when you get to a male, he will have got his X, he will be XY, he will have got his X from his mother, and the Y from the father. So the X does not come from that particular line. It's blocked, if you like, at that point in time. And so what we see is an unusual pattern for atDNA inheritance. And atDNA can only have come from certain ancestors. And those certain ancestors, it allows us to reduce the number of candidates if there is a substantial match on the X chromosome. And it can reduce it to even up to 16%, which is really quite significant. And this is what a fan chart of my ancestors looks like. There's me, here's all the ancestors that I've been able to fill in. These are the roots down here, the ones encapsulated in this red border. These are the ancestors who would have contributed potentially atDNA to me. The ones outside could not in any way possible have contributed atDNA. So if I get a substantial match on my X chromosome, I know that it can only have come from these ancestors here. It cannot come from these ones here, these ones here, these ones here. So it narrows it down quite considerably. What's the other thing that it does? Are there any potential candidates on my father's side of the family? None whatsoever. That's the great thing about atDNA. If you're a man and you get a substantial match on your X chromosome with somebody, it cannot have come from your father's side of the family. And in that way, it really, really narrows down the candidates that you have for the common ancestor on your side of the family tree. If your match is also a man, it can't have come from his father's side. The X match has to have come from the mother's side of the family. Again, narrowing down the candidates for that common ancestor. If you're a female, you get your X from your father as well as your mother, and therefore it could still be on the paternal side of the family, but we still have a very reduced number of ancestors from whom that atDNA could have come. And you can get these charts on Lane Bettinger's website as well. The link is down there. If you just Google atDNA charts, you'll find them. We can also try to separate out whether the common ancestor is on our paternal side of the family or our maternal side of the family. So, for example, I've done the DNA test. My dad has done the autosomal DNA test. If a person matches me and my dad, well, then quite obviously, common ancestor has to be on my father's side of the family. But if I have a match on my side, but it doesn't match my dad, then it has to be on my mother's side of the family. So by testing yourself and testing a parent or testing two people on different generations, you can actually narrow down a particular match to a paternal or maternal side. Now, I've tested various members in my family. Here's me here. That's my dad. That's me down there. These are my brothers, my sister, her daughter, my dad's sister, his parents here, first cousin over here, second cousin over there, and then on the my mother's side of the family, I've tested her sister. Here's a third cousin over here on my father's side, and we can triangulate. We can actually compare the matches that we get for these people who've tested in yellow and triangulate on a common ancestor. So if we look at my dad and his second cousin over here, they go back to common ancestors John Gleason and Anne Gleason. Two Gleasons married each other. John Gleason and Anne Gleason. As far as I know, they are not endogramous. There wasn't anything written on the wedding certificate, and we've done DNA testing, and that Gleason line is not the same as the other Gleason line. So they get married, but supposing we match, supposing my dad matches somebody down here, and his second cousin, Alan, also matches that person, then we know, because they match each other, that the common ancestor has to lie somewhere at or above the level of John Gleason and Anne Gleason. They're my dad and Alan's common ancestors. We know that the match with this third party has to lie either at or above that particular level. And that way we can hone down on particular ancestral couples. Now we don't know, of course, whether it's on John Gleason's side of the family or on Anne Gleason's side of the family. And it may be that, if you looked at all the people that my dad and Alan match, that there might be 10 of them. 5 of them might be connected on the paternal side of the ancestor's family. Half of them might be connected on the maternal side of the ancestor's family. You don't actually know. So if you do get, say, 10 matches between 2 cousins, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the matches are related to each other. Some of them might be related to one ancestor way back on the paternal side. Some of them might be related to an ancestor back on the maternal side of these common ancestors here. When you identify common ancestors between cousins, you can actually do this chromosome mapping. Here are all 23 chromosomes, and I've been able to identify certain segments that have come from a particular person. So this dark one up here came from John and Anne Gleason, born about 1832 to 1936, and shared with that cousin Alan. So they shared that segment there, which came from that couple. This segment came from the couple. This segment came from the couple. So you can actually map out your chromosomes to actually identify which parts of your DNA came from which ancestors. And a very interesting, colourful, and laborious type of activity. Now, the other thing that you can do is phasing, and the problem with phasing is that it is not automated at this point in time, but hopefully it will be automated in the not too distant future. And there's various techniques that you can use. Chris Appy developed this technique several years ago, very labour intensive, but ultimately what you get is all of your chromosomes divided into your 4 grandparents. And that can be very, very useful, because if you then say, well, I have a segment here and it matches right there. Okay, well I know that this particular section of my DNA that it matches has to come from my mother's father. So I've reduced the number of candidates to 25% of my ancestors. So it's worthwhile looking at if you want to get into it. GetMatch, which is a free website, allows phasing as well. So I can put in my results to GetMatch, put in my father's results to GetMatch, and it will phase the results. What that means is separating them out into the maternal copy of the chromosome and the paternal copy of the chromosome. So remember, we've got 46 chromosomes and 23 pairs. When we say, oh, you've got a match on chromosome 1, we don't know whether it's the maternal copy of chromosome 1 or the paternal copy of chromosome 1. With phasing, you can actually separate out all of your matches into what's on your paternal side, what's on your maternal side. You do need to have other people test it as well. It's very interesting actually, because when Anne Turner did this phasing, she found that the number of matches that she had dropped by 90%. So that goes to show you how many matches might be false positive, and it really emphasizes the fact to focus on the top 10% of your matches in your results. Matching segments that are IVD versus those that are IVS. This is an analysis by John Walden, and it just goes to show that at 8 centimorgans, so if your DNA segment is 8 centimorgans, you've got a 50-50 chance that it is a false positive. IVD, identified by descent, means true positive. IVS, identified by state, means false positive, in just crudely talking about it. If you get above 10 centimorgans, you've got a 99% chance it's a true positive, 1% chance it's a false positive. If you get down to 4 centimorgans, you've got a 99% chance that you're looking at a false positive segment. So be very, very careful with these small segments. They may mean absolutely nothing, and you could pursue. Pursuing them could be an exercise in futility, is how people at GetMatch describe it. There's also pile of areas, which are, again, false positives. They're vastly understudied. It's easier to see on the ADSA spreadsheets. And here's an example of 8 centimorgan segments on the ADSA spreadsheet. There's the link there, where you can see that they're all just piled up on top of each other. And they're all more or less the same length. And in some cases, this is because all of us as humans carry exactly the same DNA at particular areas. So when we code for the HLA proteins, which are to do with immunology and the immune system, you might find that we actually have exactly the same piece of DNA everywhere. But if you didn't know that, you might think, oh, I've got a connection, and it looks like it's on my maternal side. Maybe it's great-great-great-grandmother's sister that I've been looking for 20 years, and in fact, no, everybody has the same segment. So be very careful about these pile of areas. Long segments may also be a combination of several pile of areas, so you might actually get more pile of areas that are longer than 8 centimorgans, maybe up to 10. So we still do have to be careful about it. Now, this is just, I'm going to skip through these slides because we're a bit short of time, but it's just to emphasize the fact that you have 2 pairs of chromosomes compared in your DNA profile. Your match also has 2 pairs of chromosomes, and the way that it's reported is that they look at a section here, They don't look at every single base along your DNA. They look at this position here, and they report it as T, so your TT there. Your match is T and T, so that's TT there. Your match here is G and G, here it's C and T, so that's not going to match. This one is AG, this one is GA, but the machine doesn't mind that they're back to front. It'll still report that as a full match. And the same here, CA, one of these will match, one of these won't. And it ends up that you get this type of pattern on GetMatch, which some of you may be familiar with if you've uploaded your data to GetMatch, which is free and it's easy to do. And it gives you a very, very nice graphic of where you actually have a full match or a half match and where the red bits are non-matching segments at all. So that's just visualizing how 2 copies of the chromosome are compared with another 2 copies of the chromosome. Pseudophasing is something that is used from time to time, certainly by Ancestry. Hopefully we can get the other companies to do this as well. It's also possible by inference using reference populations. Ancestry uses the Underdog program. They've got a very low error rate, and hopefully in the future all companies will have this pseudo-phasing where they're using reference populations, which actually has a very, very good correlation with the parent-child trios that we would normally use for this type of phasing work. So that also helps cut out the number of false positive matches you have. So at the end of step 3, we will have eliminated these non-contenders. The most useful are the maternal versus paternal, narrowing down from a specific common ancestor by getting a parent or cousins to do the test. Ethnicity, nationality, and geography can be very, very useful to just narrowing down to a specific candidate. And a match on the X, if it is substantial, about 20 centimorgans or so, that can be quite useful too. So at the end of that, we'll have whittled down our pack of cards to a short number, and then we go on to step 4, which is working with small triangulated groups. And it's as simple as playing a game of cards. And when I say simple, I'm being totally facetious. It's very, very difficult, and it takes a lot of time and effort. But the good thing, like I said previously, is you can skip all this, just send them your pedigree and leave it at that. There's a lot of third-party tools. Here are some links to them here that can be very, very useful. You have seen the ADSA spreadsheet that I showed you a couple of slides ago. We've also talked about GetMatch. The DNA adoption site at Kworks and Jworks. So those of you that are interested in using spreadsheets and getting lost in spreadsheets, then that's very, very useful. GenomeMate is also an automated version of these spreadsheets. That could be useful too. And the Swedish DNA Project have produced or doing some interesting work, so keep an eye out on them. There's 2 strategies for triangulation. Finding known, unknown parents, working with known cousins, and triangulating on a known ancestral couple. And these are my last 2 slides. Here's my family tree again, and what I've done is I have inadvertently tested several people who are all related to this particular ancestral couple here. So I have myself, my dad, his cousin, his second cousin, oh yeah, and there's a third cousin once you move down there. They all go back to this these ancestral couples here. So what I did was I compared all their matches between these four people. A, B, C, D. A versus B, there's the matches. A versus C, there's the matches. A versus C, D. B versus C, B versus D, C versus D. And I put them all into a spreadsheet, and I had 136 matches. Took out the duplicates, and I was left with 93 individuals. And I contacted all 93 individuals by email, saying, you match 4 cousins in our family, all of whom share these common ancestors. Do you have any Spearins or any Morgans in your family tree? 60 out of 93 wrote back. One of them said, yes, we have a Morgan in our family tree. I said, great. Can you tell me about them? They said, no, we haven't done our tree yet. So guess who's doing their family tree? So, and it just illustrates the fact that you do have to do a lot of groundwork. Once you've made the possible connection, there's further documentary research that needs to be done. But it is possible, and people do find out where the common ancestor is. Of course, I don't know with this particular match whether it's on the Spearin side of this family, above this grand parental couple, or the Morgan side, because the DNA segments that they match with any of these people could have been passed either down from Catholic Spearin or his wife Mary Morgan. Just something to be aware of. Second one is then finding unknown parents, working with unknown cousins, triangulating on an unknown ancestral couple. And to do this, you have to look at the common matches that you share with people. So for example, these are the common matches that we share with each other. That means that somewhere above the common ancestor that me and my match share, everybody else has a common ancestor. And it could be on one side, it could be on the other. And it's a much more laborious process than the previous one, where you're working with known cousins. Here you're working with unknown cousins to try to triangulate on the common ancestor. And you also have to be aware of the fact that there might have been a double connection in your family. You might be fifth cousins on one side of your family, and you might be third cousins on the other side of your family. And that's going to create confusion. So it's important to keep that in mind. Here is the ADSA spreadsheet. We look at overlapping segments. We look at the matrix function to identify those people that are in common with each other. And the problem with the low-hanging fruit, these are my dad. These are some triangulated groups in my dad's family tree. And one group might be here, one group might be over there, one group might be here. The big problem is, of course, the low-hanging fruit is being blocked by the low-hanging brick wall. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But you can skip it all and just send them your pedigree and keep it simple. You know, and until you get the feel for autosomal DNA, this is the approach that I would recommend. So, secrets to success, last slide, develop your tree and share it, start with your closest matches, develop a relationship with them, keep track of what you've done. ADSA, genome-made spreadsheets, very useful. The Y-DNA projects may be a useful anchor. And I think in the future we'll be looking to see, if you're part of a Y-DNA project, is it more helpful when you have autosomal DNA matches with people within that project? We can also create more tools, and more tools are being developed all the time. And we've talked about phasing today. Ancestry have the pseudo-phasing. Hopefully family tree DNA will have it in the not-too-distant future. But there's a variety of tools that are going to help us crack these brick walls in due course. So thank you for your kind attention, for listening to me. I hope I've made some sense. Thanks very much. If there's any questions, Joss is going to carry the microphone around. So there's a question here in the front row. No, it's fine. You should just put it right up to your mouth.
Very interesting topic. Thank you very much. I've been testing with ancestry DNA.
Yeah.
And I've made a comment to be very theory of releasing the raw data, because they have a set of policies that cover the raw data, and if it comes out from them to a third party, saying they're not responsible for the privacy of that data.
That's right.
So, what's a comment on that?
Oh, sure. I think this is a big problem, because depending on what your level of comfort is with privacy, then that very, very much determines whether or not you'll be able to share your DNA with other third parties. So a lot of these third-party tools we talked about, they will require that you share your data with them, your raw data. There are ways that you can privatize yourself so that you don't become identifiable. So, for example, when I upload to GetMatch, I will not give the full name of the people, and I have also used pseudonyms, Clint Eastwood, that kind of thing, just to make sure that I can remain anonymous and privatized. So you do have to be careful when you're looking at these third-party tools to see just exactly how private or how not private your data is going to be. Because these are open to the public. Some of them are open to the public if you're freely viewable. They won't necessarily identify you, but they might identify your DNA markers or the values you have for your DNA markers. So you just have to be a little bit cautious about uploading your data, especially if your level of privacy threshold is quite high. Question there?
I suspect your analysis will last.
All right.
So I am something like in terms of, I know you have the data on there, in terms of sentinel, can you distinguish between
in terms of numbers? Sure, no, it's a very good question actually, because if you just had the centimorgan value, for example, the grandparent-grandson relationship would be 25%. That would be the same as a half-sister relationship. And it might also be the same as a, let me see, look at an example. Well, an example of a first cousin, 12.5%. That could also be a half-nephew. So, and that's what happened with that 76-year-old lady I spoke about. The computer said, oh, got first cousin. She said, that's first cousin, but I don't think it's first cousin because I'm 75, he's 35. So, probably for something like first cousin. And then you'd be expecting 6.25% DNA. They have closer to 12.5% DNA, which is why they put together the first cousin. So you cannot tell just by looking at the centimorgan what one relationship actually is. But we'll say it's either grandparent-grandson, grandparent-grandchild, or it's first cousin, or it's half-sister, or half-sibling. It'll give you a range of possibilities, and nephew as well. So that's that sort of thing. You'll get that from the chart, but you actually have to know a little bit about the genealogy. Say, well, I know they're not from the same generation as that, so they're not first cousins. They're removed in some way, so they can only do this or this. Parents are? All right. Okay. Well, if they're cousins on different levels, that's interesting. Well, it shouldn't affect your faith. I mean, if you have your parents are related to each other on two different levels, then what is going to happen is that you're going to have, you won't have as many ancestors as the rest of them, because you'll be double counting some of those ancestors. So some of those ancestors are supplying more DNA than others, potentially. In practice, I think, the further you go back, it doesn't necessarily, if it's a very distant cousin relationship, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. Further you go back, really gets more and smaller amounts of certain ancestors. In terms of the phasing, I don't think it should matter at all. I think you should still be able to phase what DNA is involved in your father and what DNA is involved in your mother. But what you might actually find is that certain bits of DNA will be repeated on the paternal or maternal side. And perhaps the phase in the program have some difficulty distinguishing between certain segments, potentially. I think you'd be able to have 99% of your DNA phase without any major problem. But I don't want to know. Well, we'll call it a quiz there. I think I've overloaded you already, so thanks very much.